right, let's get this party started. Welcome to today's webinar, Leveraging Customer Feedback. It is the fourth part of our Transforming Your Service Experience webinar series, and we are really excited. We are really closing it out today with a huge, we've got some juggernauts in the house. Annette Franz, Matt Dixon are going to be with us in just a moment. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Stephanie Ramos. I'm the events manager here at Internet Creations. And to my right is a very familiar voice and face, although you are not able to see him. This picture will have to do it justice. Our director of product here, at Internet Creations, Howard Yermish. Welcome. Thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Hello, everybody out in webinar land. It's nice to be here with all of you on this fine, rainy, and at least it's rainy for us in Hamilton, New Jersey, but you know, it's Halloween. I'm not dressed up other than being dressed up as the product director at Internet Creations. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. And Howard actually has some really fun stuff coming up next month in approximately 18-20 days or so. He is going to be speaking at this year's Dreamforce about how to dramatically improve the service experience when moving to Lightning. So
it's super exciting. I'm going to show you how to use all kinds of cool things to make it so that all of the different pillars that we've talked about in this webinar series are actually part of this talk. I'm going to talk about feedback, but I'm also going to talk about responsiveness, utilization, as well as personalization. That's all part of this talk that I'm doing at Dreamforce. I'm really excited about it.
I am really excited to see you because I will actually also be at Dreamforce. If you are headed there, just a quick little promo, come visit us at the CX Suite. It's happening just steps, a few little bare steps away from the 3rd Street Tap Room. I actually don't think that we are showing our screen. There we go. That was my bad. So we are going to be at the CX Suite at the 3rd Street Tap Room all week long. You can visit us, ic.force.com/df19 to schedule time to meet with us, play games with us. We are giving away an Apple Watch, the brand new one, and everyone who books a meeting with us will be given a VIP swag bag, which we will also be giving away one lucky attendee at the end of this webinar.
Cool.
All right, so now that we got some of that housekeeping out of the way, I want to introduce our first speaker. She has over 25 years of experience in helping both companies understand their employees and customers and identifying what drives retention, satisfaction, engagement, and the overall experience. Additionally, she's a speaker, coach, and the founder and CEO of CX Journey Inc. She's also the author of Customer Understanding, 3 Ways to Put the Customer in Customer Experience, and serves on the board of directors of the Customer Experience Professionals Association. That was a mouthful. She's a very awesome lady. Please welcome Annette Franz. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me. And wow, that was a great introduction. And by the way, and I think Matt may agree, but I'm not going to speak for Matt. I've never been called a juggernaut before, so thank you for that.
Same here.
Well, we are all very excited to have you both here. Our next speaker is the Chief Product and Research Officer at Tethr. He's also the co-author of the Challenger Sale, the Challenger Customer, and the Effortless Experience. Please welcome Matt Dixon to today's webinar. Matt, thank you so much for being here with us as well.
Yeah, wonderful to be here with all of you, Stephanie, Howard, and Annette. I also have never been called a juggernaut, although behind my back, when I make my kids do chores, they probably think you call me a juggernaut of evil. So.
Oh no. Juggernauts of customer experience, rather. At least for today. That's your costume for today.
I had to Google that just to see if there was a costume, and yes, there is. There's actually a character, a Marvel character called Juggernaut. So pretty cool looking character. So there we go.
Is it an evil character?
It is an evil character.
Ooh, he's in the X-Men number 12.
I have my children trained, Matt, to call me the bringer of all things that are good. So I think
Wow, that's pretty good.
Yes, I have them snowed.
So let's get into some, just a quick how to ask questions. We want to take your questions throughout the entire webinar. You can do so by going to the GoToWebinar questions panel, probably on the right-hand side of your screen, and just answer questions. We'll be popping in there so you can ask us questions throughout today's episode. Okay, so let's test this bad boy out. Where are y'all calling from, tuning in from this afternoon or morning, wherever it is where you're from? We are here in rainy Hamilton, New Jersey this afternoon, and we also have offices in Dallas, Texas. Matt, Annette, where are you two tuning in from or joining us this afternoon?
I'll let Annette go first, since well, actually, I should go first because Annette's in a better location than me. So I'm actually in just outside Washington, D.C., which is rainy, but it's a celebratory rainy because of the big Nationals win last night. So, but it is not where Annette is, who I think is in the nicest location of all.
Well, thank you. Yes, and congrats on the win. That was pretty amazing. That's awesome for you guys. I am in Orange County, California, and some may say that is a good thing, but at this time of the year, you know, it's a little hot, dry. Well, it's not hot. It was actually 41 degrees here at 5 o'clock this morning, but dry and windy, and trying to stay away from the fire. So, but yeah, definitely love it.
Yeah, stay safe out there, and thinking about all our friends out there in California who are dealing with those horrific fires. So Howard, where do we have people calling in or tuning in from today?
Well, we have someone from Massachusetts has let us know that they're there. So more people could definitely tell us where they're calling in from. So use that questions panel to tell us where you're from.
Yes, and always ask questions. We want to take your questions throughout. We've got a jam-packed show today, but we will be answering. We're here for you. So if you have questions throughout, ask us anything hard, easy, whatever. So let's talk about the agenda. First, we're going to go through some basics, why we should care about feedback. And then we'll go into why feedback can be such a struggle and why companies are getting this wrong. It is a thing that seems easy, but for some reason we haven't cracked the code just yet. And I think we're going to try and do that today. And we're also going to be talking about how to improve the customer experience with feedback. And then finally, we'll dive into the right way to survey. And we'll actually also, after that, take a quick peek at the future of feedback. I'm really excited about that discussion. So, Howard, over the last few months, we have talked to different experts to explore different paths of what makes up a great service experience. We've talked about utilization, responsiveness, personalization, and finally, here we are at feedback. Can you explain to us why feedback, how it's defined in terms of the service experience?
Sure. Feedback really ends up being the kind of almost like the connective tissue for all of these things. So for example, if you're doing a really good job making sure you've got a fully utilized set of employees, they've got the right work to work on, there's no duplication, they're making good use of their time, there's really good tools for it, that's great. That should show up when you ask your customers. Like, did you have to wait on hold for a long time? Or did you get a response within a day or an hour or a minute, whatever that metric is for you? Same thing with that responsiveness that I just mentioned. If your customers are telling you, hey, it would be really nice if it was more responsive service, or I had to send you an email and then call you and then fill out a form and then go on a chat. Maybe the responsiveness needs some adjustment. So think about feedback as the thing that's going to connect everything back together. But it's so important to be listening for it all the way through the process. So you know, if your customers don't feel like they're being treated like a priority, you can work on that. That's something to fix. If your customers don't feel like they're being a partner, maybe you're not personalizing the way you need to be. Again, feedback is something where in listening to the customer all the way through the whole service experience, that's what's going to help you improve that experience.
Thank you so much for breaking that down for us, Howard. So I want to turn to our panelists now. Annette, I'll start with you. It may sound pretty simple, but why should companies care about feedback in the first place?
I'm going to say two words: because customers. That's you know, Seriously, it's what we're all about, right? If we don't have customers and we don't understand them and the experience that they're having today and how we can make it better going forward, we will not have customers, or we'll have a lot fewer, or we'll have a lot more pissed off customers who aren't, sharing their great experiences with their friends and family. So it really is about really listening and understanding our customers, their needs, their expectations, how they were met or how they weren't met, how well the business is performing against all of that, and then taking what we learn and doing something with it and offering up a better experience.
Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about taking what we actually get from customers and putting it into practice. How about you, Matt? Why feedback?
Well,
Why do we need it?
I'm with Annette 1,000% here. It is because customers that is absolutely the right answer. And what I would say is just to add to what Annette said, which I agree completely with, is I think one of the important parts of feedback is that it allows organizations or affords organizations an opportunity to actually question a lot of their assumptions. So I think too often in CX, and I know Annette has spoken and written about this as well, is that oftentimes we go out and we kind of manage these things by gut. We make assumptions on behalf of our customers, what we think they need or they want, or what frustrates them or delights them. And feedback is a great way for us to actually test some of those things. If it allows us to take kind of a clear-eyed view around what are the things that actually deliver a great customer experience, and what are the things that actually destroy the customer experience. And sometimes there are things that we thought would be great that customers actually don't value or find to be irritants in the customer experience. And so I think it's great for that reason too. I see too many organizations out there that lead with assumptions in conventional wisdom, and they don't really leverage their customer feedback to pressure test some of their beliefs and some of their assumptions.
I think that's a great point. Matt, do you have any ways that you have used feedback to increase customer satisfaction? Maybe one of those you mentioned questioning our assumptions and finding out that customers don't like what you thought was going to be a huge hit.
Yeah, it's a great point. So a great question. I have a really long example, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to share it until we have time at the end. But let me give you the short example. One of the things we actually studied over the years was the impact that certain kind of scripted statements that a company representative would use in a service interaction. These kind of scripted things that we make our agents say or representatives say. Because it feels good, it just feels like the right thing to do. A fun fact is one of the things that almost every contact center or customer service rep in the world says to a customer is, thank you for your business or thank you for your loyalty. And what we found in studying it with data is that that actually made customers less loyal, not more loyal, when you said those things. And the reason is not because the words are bad, it's because the way it's expressed typically is in a very generic and robotic way. It's like, you don't really care about my loyalty or my business. And so it ends up actually in many respects creating disloyalty, not loyalty. So that's just a small example, but there's so many things that we find. Another example that comes to mind is really, when we can leverage feedback, we can understand how things that we put out there for our customers in their journey are actually working or not working. So many times, so many companies are focused on digital right now, launching apps and other digital capabilities for their customers to take advantage of. And those things are often designed internally, maybe even designed by IT. We don't really know if they're working in the way that they should in delivering a low effort, high quality experience for our customers. But feedback gives us an opportunity to understand, hey, we poured all this money into the website and we provide all this knowledge to our customers, all these FAQs, all this support, but it turns out people are calling us anyway because they don't understand what we're saying. And so, they found the answer to their question, but they were still confused. And so they pick up the phone and call, which then compounds the effort and the friction of the experience, derails the customer journey in a bad way, and again, gives us an opportunity to leverage that feedback to go and fix the thing that would really provide that customer a more optimal experience with us.
Yeah, that's a really great point. So next, I want to talk about the things that we struggle most. I think, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure that I have about 15 surveys sitting in my inbox right now if I were to go in my Do you
Wait,
know
only 15? How
Yeah,
about
right?
Well, it's 1 o'clock, and I probably deleted like at least half of them that I got from this morning. So I check my email pretty often. But that being said, and you're all laughing because it's true, and you probably have 10 times more. But we're being surveyed more than ever. Everyone wants their feedback, and it's a huge struggle for companies. And I think two big ways. One, customers aren't giving it. People like me are just deleting that survey because it's going to take only a few minutes of my time, and it ends up taking half an hour. I don't have that time. And then once you do give feedback, it feels like it's just going to the void. I just filled out a very angry survey this week, which they said, here, put your contact information in if you want to be reached out to. And I have had no response. So companies are not doing anything with the feedback. So Annette, I'll start with you. Why do so many companies get feedback wrong?
I don't know what the why is, other than, I think a lot of it is there's pressure to, you've got to listen to your customers, you've got to get feedback. And so you get surveyed I get surveys from the library, from the veterinarian, from the doctor, like everybody surveys you now, and so, and unfortunately too many of them do it just to check the box, to say, yeah, we listen to our customers, but listening includes hearing and then doing something with what you hear. So that's the part that's not happening. I typically, I chalk it up to two things. One of them is, other than, just checking the box. So one of them is that companies just collect feedback, right? I hate when and I use it too, because it's just the easiest term to use. We collect feedback, but I always compare it to collecting postage stamps. I don't know why, but that analogy came to me a few years ago. And I was thinking about my dad, who collects postage stamps. And, you go to the post office, you get the sheet of stamps that you want, you come home, you look at them, you put them in your book, and you close the book and you put the book on the shelf, and it gets dusty until the next time you find another great, postage stamp that you want to collect. And I liken that to what companies do with feedback, right? They collect feedback. They just data, feedback's coming in, and maybe they'll analyze it, maybe, and then, create these massive reports and put them in a binder and give them to the manager, and the manager puts it on the shelf, just like the postage stamps, right? Just like the book. So to me, people just collect. And again, that's very similar to the checking the box. The other thing that happens is the chasing of the metric, right? Hey, let's focus on the metric rather than focusing on taking that feedback and using it to actually improve the experience. And I always say, when we focus on doing what it takes to move the needle, we do things differently and we do different things than when we focus on what it takes to improve the experience, which will ultimately, move the needle. So we see bad behavior like, I was at J.D. Power and Associates 27 years ago, so I know very well where this comes from, right? The car dealerships go, and here's a free oil change, here's a free Sam's Club membership, here's free candy bars, here's my firstborn, kind of thing. Excuse me, just to, because if you don't rate me a 10 out of 10, I'm going to get fired, or I'm going to get demoted, or I'm not going to get my commission or whatever. And so it's a bad experience for the customer, who has to stand there and listen to the salesperson beg and grovel, and it's a bad experience for the employee too. So again, when we focus on the metric, we're not focusing on the experience, and it's a struggle. And unfortunately, I have to say that I think this whole notion of NPS and, it's just the one number you need, and that's all you need to do, and that's all you need to focus on, really sort of created this problem. And again, JD Power, it happened back in the days then too, but it was sort of kept alive with NPS and how it's just such an easy number to focus on and all of that. And people certainly focused on the number. So those are my thoughts.
No, I think that's a great point. And I want to, kind of go into that whole idea of this like two-part right now. So not getting feedback and just, collecting it like you're collecting stamps. I was reading a study that said that over 80% of customers admitted that they would leave a response if they knew they were being heard. So Matt, do you have anything to add here as to, this notion of wanting the data, but then not doing anything with the data?
The only thing I'd add is that I'm going to make a mental note not to do webinars with Annette anymore, because she steals all the good lines. So. But
Aw,
with
come
that
on, Matt.
caveat, let me just, I'm in the pylon position here. So I think, Annette totally nailed it. What the number one problem I see out there is this chasing of the number. And, if we're brutally honest, the reason we chase the number is because people are paid or bonused on the number, right? So they care more about collecting a sufficient sample of NPS scores so that executives and managers can get paid their bonus, and they chase that number and try to hit thresholds, but never really take the time to listen to the feedback, which ironically would be the thing that would actually move the needle upward. There in today's day and age, and I know that of course Howard's going to talk about this, and Stephanie, you and Howard and the team at Internet Creations are experts on this, but you've got kind of this problem out there of how do we stop the bleeding on surveys? Like you mentioned the number of surveys and how many you have in your inbox. I actually did when you said that, I did some quick mental math. I was telling Annette and the Internet Creations team before the webinar started today that I have an airline I fly a lot with. I've flown close to 100 times with them already this year. And I get 4 surveys for every flight that I book and travel on, right? So I get a flight after the booking process, whether it's online or it's with an agent. I get a survey after the flight. I get a survey if I use the Wi-Fi, which by the way is 100% of the flights. I get a survey if I go to the lounge, which is like at least 75 to 80% of the time I'm in the airport. So and the problem is you get into this vicious cycle. So imagine this big airline, which I'm not going to mention, but you all know them, sending out all these surveys, and they're already not getting a high response rate. And then what happens is when it becomes like noise, and then the feedback goes into the void, Stephanie, as you say here on the slide, it just perpetuates the problem. So I remember earlier this year filling out a survey for this airline with some feedback about the in-flight experience and about the Wi-Fi. And I took the time to give some pretty, I was going to say colorful, but that's not the right term, but some pretty detailed feedback about the in-flight experience. And I never heard anything back. And the next time I got that same survey asking me about my in-flight and Wi-Fi experience, I had zero incentive to actually fill it out because they never even acknowledged that they got the feedback in the first place. And look, as a customer, my view is like, I don't need you to do exactly what I'm recommending because I'm not an expert on airline Wi-Fi or in-flight Wi-Fi. But what would be great is if you at least responded and said, thank you for your feedback, and we're not going to do what you suggest, or we can't do what you suggest, or here's we've sent it to these people and they're working on this thing, and you should expect some announcement by this date on our new in-flight Wi-Fi program, whatever it is. Just give me some sort of acknowledgement that you heard me. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's what people in big companies kind of get paid to do. I think more often they're getting paid to collect these survey responses to hit a sample size to pay out bonuses. And that's, which unfortunately is exactly what Annette said. It's a chasing the number mindset, but you're losing focus on what really matters, which is the feedback your customers are giving you about their actual experience, which if you did that and you responded and you showed that you're listening, would actually drive those metrics in a more positive direction.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And we're definitely going to get to, I want to talk more about this idea of a more effortless experience for customers. But before we do, I want to talk about actually getting that negative feedback. So, we talked a little bit before the webinar about what to do when you do when you're given negative feedback from customers. And Howard, I know you would have some thoughts here on how negative feedback for our companies can actually be a huge opportunity for them. So can you talk a little bit about this?
Sure. Negative feedback really, it's the opportunity to prove to your customers that you are listening. And when Matt said earlier about like not being an expert in that company's business, not acknowledging feedback, it's the easiest thing to do. And you shouldn't do it through an autoresponder. I know why a lot of companies want to do it, but I want to reflect a story that actually happened this morning. Customer filled out a survey. They actually loved what we did. Gave a really positive experience, gave us a 10 out of 10, and said specifically what they liked about it. They got an email from me about an hour later that I wrote that said, thank you so much. It helps me coach my employees, and they hit on a point that I've been coaching them on. So it helps validate that, and I'm going to let them know. and I got the reply email. And I'm going to read you a little bit of the reply because it's so important, because it came, our customers all do support. And what she said was, as a support specialist, I'm impressed with your company's quick response from every department, blah, 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 blah. The internal communication is viewed as very cohesive, blah, 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 blah. The important part here is, after the survey, additional follow-up from the management team is icing on the cake. This is now a customer for life because we listened. We could have just simply said, thanks for your feedback on an autoresponder, and it would have felt empty. But the fact that it came from the person's manager, closing the loop that way, it's really super duper positive. And when it's negative, you do the exact same activity. You let people know. I have found that I will get a survey response from someone for the very first time, and they'll give us a nice score. Hey, everything's great. The next time they have a support case and they give us a survey, I get more and more useful feedback. So it really is an opportunity to say, look, I've got this process. I'm going to reflect on it. I'm going to give back to the customer what they took the time for me. That's an investment in the future in terms of what I can learn.
That's a great point. And it kind of drives home that idea where Annette said earlier about feedback being a two-way street. This is a conversation. We aren't collecting stamps. And I think that if we view feedback as a two-way street, as a conversation, then we'll probably be getting more and more feedback. I want to talk to Matt. I want to turn to you. We talked a little bit in our prep for this webinar on the idea of this effortless experience where, surveys are great, but there's a more well-rounded thing that we can do. So can you go into that a little bit for us?
Yeah, sure. So we, we wrote some research over the years around the idea of reducing effort and friction in the experience, and it's as we like to say, look, it's all well and good to delight your customers, and you should do that, right? There's sort of no point being in business if you don't. But you got to make sure you do it in the right places. So you want to make sure you do that with a standout product that outperforms your competitor's product, with a really cool and compelling brand, with a great in-store experience, or the airline example I used before, a great lounge, a great website, a great in-flight experience. Those are all kind of the product that we sold the customer, and those are awesome opportunities to delight and differentiate. But the core of the argument in the research was, when things go wrong and your customer reaches out to you for help, whether they call your call center, they have a field technician come to their home, they go to the retail store for help, they go to the website to try to self-serve on their problem, those are not the times to try to delight. Those are actually the times to make it easy and reduce effort, because we found is most service experiences, when things go wrong, are actually create disloyalty, not loyalty. And I think we further compound that, to bring it around to the question we're talking about today about customer feedback. I think we often compound that problem by having a customer go through a high effort experience. Imagine, with a call center representative, a frustrating experience, very high effort for the customer. And then on the back end of that, having them go through a survey, which is also a high effort experience, often to retell us a lot of the things that we already could understand through other means. And so, I really do think, and others have said this before, but I'm excited to be able to scoop Annette on this one. So because I know she'll say that, but the survey or the feedback experience is actually part of the customer experience. And I think oftentimes we think of it as almost separate from that, but we've got to think of an experience in collecting that feedback that also is reducing effort, or also helps reinforce our brand message, that it's not separate from the customer experience we're trying to create. It's part and parcel of that experience. So I think really think about the ways to reduce effort. I don't necessarily think that means, going for the one question survey or the uber streamlined survey necessarily, but it does mean being thoughtful in the way we collect feedback. So I think here's an example, and I know this may be something that we'll talk about here, and if not, I'm sure Howard will talk about this at Dreamforce in a few weeks. But this idea of personalization and reaching out to customers who have bad experiences to really understand the nature of that bad experience and what could we have done better, but to reflect a level of understanding. Like the thing that I think ultimately with my airline example before frustrated me was, I think the airline should probably know through their own data that the Wi-Fi wasn't really working very well in this flight, and they had a lot of customers complaining. And then to send me a survey asking me to rate the Wi-Fi on the flight, it's like, hey, how about sending me a survey that says, hey, we know the Wi-Fi was really awful on the flight, so can you give us some feedback about exactly what happened and where it failed you, and so that we can get this to our technical folks and they can work on fixing the product. Like, that would have felt way lower effort, even if it's the same number of questions, because at least that company took the time to contextualize and personalize that request for feedback.
Yeah, it's this acknowledgement of acknowledgement and putting into some sort of self-awareness, I would imagine, into a lot of the things that we have automated, which automation is great. It saves us time, it saves us clicks, but sometimes that automation depersonalizes. That's not a word, but I'm making it so, the experience for folks. So now that we've, we've dived into the issue of customer feedback, I want to talk about what we can do to use feedback to improve the experience. So Annette, I'll start with you here. What do you think that companies can do to ensure not just a good CSAT score, NPS score, but an overall experience as well?
Yeah, and this is, I'm glad we're talking about this, because I'm glad we're talking about it in the vein of feedback, because this is a conversation that I've had quite a bit, especially lately when it comes to journey mapping. I get, clients or potential clients calling me up and saying, hey, we want you to do a journey mapping workshop. But then you have to say, okay, well, what does that mean? Do you have the foundation in place? Because once we do the workshop, I mean, you've let the dogs out, you've let the horses out of the barn, and we are running, right? You have to go and do something with it, and there's a bigger picture that you have to look at. And so really, the point being that you have to have the foundation in place to use any sort of feedback or data, or if you're journey mapping or whatever it is, to improve the experience, right? So you've got to have the executive commitment. You've got to have this customer-centric culture in place, one that is going to embrace that feedback and already knows what to do with the feedback and what the next steps are. It's got to become a part of your DNA, right? So there's more than just, hey, we're doing a survey here or we're doing a survey there. You've got to have that foundation in place. You've got to have your governance structures and having those committees and having this sort of adoption from employees within and being able to pick up that feedback and know what to go do with it, or if they get feedback, know who to go to make sure that's centralized so everybody knows about that. So that's what I mean by having sort of that foundation in place, so that it's not just about doing a survey. And because if it is just about doing a survey, it's going to become that checkbox. It's going to become that, hey, let's just focus on the metric. It's going to become nothing. It's not going to be ultimately going to be used to improve the experience. So that's my response, is make sure that the foundation and the structure are in place, so that when you do get that feedback and when you get that data, that you know what to do with it and everybody else in the organization is on board.
And it sounds like that, I'll ask you just to define it just a little bit more, but you mentioned customer-centric culture. And can you explain a little bit more about what that means? Because I think it ties in from what I've read from your reading, your writings in the past. You have a really unique way of explaining customer-centric culture in terms of the customer experience and feedback and how it relates to the two.
Yeah, I mean, so a customer-centric culture is one where we put the customer at the heart of the business and at the heart of everything we do, right? I like to say no discussion, no decision, no design without bringing the customer voice into it, without first asking, how will that impact the customer? What value will that add for her? How will it help her, solve her problems or do whatever job she's trying to do? That's a really important piece of that. It's also about, people before profits, people before products, people before metrics. It's really about, again, doing nothing, without first considering the customer and what the impact is going to be on the customer. If we think about it, most organizations have designed all these processes, and they designed even their products without having the customer in mind, which is crazy. And I'll go back to my first answer, because customer, it's why we're in business, right? It's all about the customer. And if we don't have customers, if we're not solving problems or helping them, do whatever job they're trying to do, then it's all for nothing. So so customer-centric culture is definitely about, having the customer at the heart of everything that you do.
And I know that we've talked a little bit also about incorporating the employees into this process as well of making sure that you engage employees into the experience so that they can also provide that great experience for the customers. Happy employees, we say here at Internet Creations, create happy customers.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't have a customer-centric culture without putting the employees more first, right? You have to put the employees in the employee experience first. So
exactly. Matt, when do you think is a good time for companies to use feedback? How do you envision that? And I know I ask you specifically because you have this awesome airline experience just more recently at the top of your head here.
Yeah, so I think, well, first, let me just share a quick thought on the employee experience, just because I was going to jump in there. But it is we write, as I talked about before, about this idea of reducing effort, which is ultimately about being easy to do business with for your customers. But the truth is, just as Annette has said, you've got to put the employees first. So what does that mean? That means that it's really hard to expect your employees to give the customer the impression that you're easy to do business with, when you're actually a hard company to work for your people. And so, you've got to collect that feedback as much internally. And we always talk about this idea of, if you're about reducing effort, well, effort reduction starts at home. Are you shackling your reps with legacy policies and processes and scripts and QA checklists that don't really make sense, and you're micromanaging them and you're screen popping them, telling them what to say and what to do, and robbing of them of the opportunity to use their judgment and feel like they can really deliver a great customer experience on their own. And so don't be surprised when your customers come back and tell you, if your people work in that kind of environment, that you're a pain to do business with, because you've made it a pain to work as a company to work for your employees. There's a great example of this that I wrote about last year from T-Mobile. They really have overhauled their employee or their management culture, and what they did was, if you think about a kind of a pyramid structure in the typical organization, with your executive leadership and your middle management and then your frontline employees, what they've done is really inverted that. And so what they've done in their contact centers, they've said to their employees, you are the owners of the customer experience and of the customer. So here's a team of reps maybe in Richmond, and you own these 200,000 subscribers in Salt Lake City, and your job is to own the P&L. You are the P&L owners of your own small business. We want you to retain those customers, and we want you to get them to spend more with us. We want you to get them to say great things about us, and you tell us what you need to make that happen. So is it a policy that's in your way? Is it a system that is making it hard for you to resolve customer issues? Is it some training or some technology that you need that's going to make it easier for you to deliver that great customer experience? And it's really transformed the way to do business. It's a scary proposition, I think, for a lot of companies, to this idea of putting their front line in more of an ownership role of the customer experience. But when it's done, obviously it means you got to hire the right people, right? But when it's done, it can produce dramatic effect. Then I guess on your question, Stephanie, on timing, I don't know that there's a right answer necessarily. I think typically we think about surveying or collecting feedback at the end of a transaction, right? Is it a service interaction? Was it a sales interaction? Was it a website visit, et cetera? But I think the best way to do it is really at various kind of waypoints or stage gates through the customer journey. There are lots of opportunities that, for instance, understanding the feedback of those customers who are window shopping and who actually never really become customers. What was it like when they came into the store to browse, or they went to our website to kind of poke around and check our products and our pricing, and understand why did that not kind of pull them in to want to become a customer of ours. That's as valuable as that customer who had a frustrating contact center experience or who bought a product. And so thinking about this as feedback is something that happens throughout the customer journey, not just at the conclusion of an event, if you will, or at the end of the customer journey, you've bought or you've renewed or you've gotten a problem solved. But really thinking about it more happening across the entire journey.
I think that's a great point, and it kind of, so I won't ask it again, but we're talking about using feedback across the entirety of your business, from using it to coach employees, using it to empower employees, which you're talking about here, creating that, that feedback is not just for support, that asking it throughout the life cycle of a customer journey is going to be so crucial to your business, to not just probably, I would imagine, it making it more cost effective, but increasing retention, increasing loyalty from the beginning, like starting them off as loyal customers or loyal pre-customer, loyal prospects, and taking them through the life cycle of their journey here. So, all right, I think we got through like a lot of the meat here. I want to go to some fun stuff. We talked about different ways to collect feedback, and I want to talk about some right way to collect surveys, or to survey to collect feedback. So Matt, Annette, I'll start with Annette first here. What do you think are some ways that companies should be surveying?
Oh boy. Are you looking at the technical aspects of the survey themselves, or are you asking about different ways to listen to customers?
So I think, I know we talked about a little bit about that idea of having a goal in mind, right?
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I have talked and written about is something that I call actionability thinking. It's not very, I don't know, it's not very clever, but it is what it is. It's really, when you're designing your survey, you have to think about making it actionable. If it's not actionable, then why do it, right? If you don't ask good questions and quality questions, you're going to get crap, garbage in, garbage out. We know that, right? So when I'm working with folks in terms of designing surveys, I really ask like a whole series of questions. Why always, objectives and desired outcomes. I think that's a good place to start. What are you going to do with it? And not just with the survey as a whole, but with each individual question. I think people need to stop and just pause and say, what am I going to do with that question? Can I do anything with that question? Is it actionable? Is it something that we can actually change? Is it the right way to ask the question? It's not double-barreled and, all those kinds of things. Who owns the question? When we get feedback, who's going to do something with it, right? Those kinds of things. And why are we asking this? So just taking a minute when you're designing the survey itself to make sure it's actionable by asking some of those really, sometimes they're hard questions, because you hear from others in the organization, hey, we want to hear about this. We want feedback about that. But you got to stop and say, well, what are you going to do with it? Great. Now my survey's, 100 questions long, but what are we going to do with it? No, please don't ask any 100 question surveys. Those are like,
please don't.
It's just not going to fly these days, right?
We do not recommend that here at Internet Creation.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely. So, but yeah, it's really to just take a moment to pause and say, why are we doing this, and who's going to do what with it, and how are we going to use this, and those kinds of things. I think those are important questions to ask.
Yeah, and Matt, I think alongside that whole idea of effortless experience, you'd imagine you'd probably, if you were getting those surveys from that airline, which will remain nameless, you'd probably want them to be simple, right? Not taking 15 minutes of your time.
Yeah, for sure. I think I think you can earn the time with the customer in the way that you deliver the degree of personalization and contextualization, and that you're asking questions that are getting right to the thing that you already know happened or may have gone wrong for the customer, or the opportunity that you see. So I've kind of this point of view that or of this mindset that we shouldn't be using surveys to ask questions that we should already know the answer to. So in our research, we talked about this metric, the customer effort score, which was a survey question designed to help a company identify which customers had high and low effort experiences. There are other ways to find out whether, and we can, maybe towards the end of the the webinar today, we'll talk about that around like future of measurement and
Yes.
VOC analytics and things like that. But asking a customer, I'd stand by the question as kind of a good thing to do, because we know that service tends to drive disloyalty, and disloyalty is a function of high effort. So you should find out who are those customers who had high effort experiences. But today there are easier ways to understand that, and so instead we should be using our surveys to dig in to understand what about the experience was high effort, and what would the customer want us to do differently, or who are companies they think are actually doing a better job than we are. So it allows us to get, not ask for customers effectively to repeat themselves. Imagine the customer who has a 30-minute blow up conversation with a call center rep and his or her supervisor and that person's manager, and and gets off the phone and they're super angry. To be asked, send a survey to ask how easy it was. I mean, that itself is, it's not just naive, it's frustrating, and it's high effort for the customer. And so then sending a survey that says, wow, it feels like we missed the mark in delivering our experience delivering this experience to you. What could we have done better here? Feels like, okay, you heard me, you understand that that something didn't happen the right way, and this is a great, or it could be a positive, right? Hey, you bought this thing, and that's great, and help us understand why. So it gives us an opportunity to dig a lot deeper if we kind of leverage the things that we should already know with our own operational data and our own other sources of data, so that we can really use surveys to optimal effect. I just, for me, when I think about survey, there are surveys that grab my attention and surveys that don't, and the ones that don't grab my attention are the ones that just feel like the same survey sent to every single person. There's nothing unique about it. Not necessarily longer, but they're tend to be redundant and kind of I was going to say like antiseptic, but that's not really the right word. But it's very clinical, right? Versus the surveys that grab my attention give me an opportunity to actually enter in my feedback, right? And then ideally I'll do it again when that customer does something with that, when that company does something with that feedback. So it gives me a chance to express myself, and I can answer a couple of your questions because I know people are paid on the answers to those questions. But more importantly, it's almost like it sends me the message you care more about what I'm typing into the box than the the score, the number I gave you on your specific questions.
And Matt, you mentioned something earlier. It's a phrase that really stuck with me because it's really about how I approach surveys: earning the customer's time. And the way you brought it in there, it's like, it isn't just, hey, you're going to get this survey again and again and again, and that's like almost disrespectful or antiseptic as you describe it. But that earned time in the response, I think what that really comes from is having personalized things, having fed back to the customer, so they give you some feedback and you feedback from it.
Yep.
I can tell you, if we get customers who do multiple surveys, I don't send an email to them before I check how many times have they sent us survey responses before. And sometimes those little points, just knowing who your customer is, writing them something that's worth them reading, it's just got to be part of it. It's too easy to skip those steps.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, and it is really a game of look, customers are bombarded with surveys. There really is kind of survey fatigue out there, survey overload, whatever the term we want to use. But you got to fight for mind share, and you got to earn that customer's time. And when you've done something right, you've earned the time of the customer to actually take time to type out some feedback, or to give you a record something into an IVR survey, and really share that feedback, because they know that either it's the way, like you said, it was positioned up front, it was the way the question was asked, it was the personalization and the contextualization that was represented in the survey experience itself. It was that it was low effort, but it's the fact that I did it before, and I really appreciated that a manager called me a week later and said, "Hey, I read your verbatim. I hate that this happened. I want you to know we're actually working on this, and thank you for the feedback because it helps us get better as a company." That earns my time next time, right? Because I know that the company's paying attention, they're listening.
That's awesome. And so I want to transition a little bit, because I know we are up against the clock here, about something that it's like a little bit of a contentious debate between my panelists and Howard and all of us here about incentives, because we're talking about earning, and we're talking, I love the conversation we're having about earning feedback from customers, because it is, it's special and it's authentic. But I want to talk about what sometimes cannot be authentic, and what I know Annette feels very strongly about gaming the system, about rewarding, offering rewards. $50 if you fill out a survey, or a chance to win $100. I just got one that was chance to win a $500 Amex gift card, and I was real excited. And then I saw it took 15 minutes, so I said delete. So let's talk about this. We'll push through it fairly quickly. But Annette, to reward or not to reward, how do we feel?
Not to reward. I can't. You know what? Here's the best reward. Do something with the feedback and tell your customers what you did with it. That is the best incentive. And quite honestly, I think most people would be okay with that, you know, and if they're not, then they're the kinds of people who are taking surveys so they can get a free meal tomorrow kind of thing. You know, it's to get something, you know, and maybe they're not going to provide honest feedback because they've got this incentive that they're like, ooh, as soon as I do this, I'm going to get $2 off my Starbucks drink or whatever it is. Right. You know, so I think again, it's when we incentivize both, you know, same thing when I was talking about, you know, what moves the needle and focusing on the metric and the incentives and all of that. It's the behaviors that we advocate and that we're okay for, that we're rewarding. And those behaviors are oftentimes bad behaviors. So yeah, I am on the no incentive. The reward or incentive should actually be that you take the feedback, you do something with it, let your customers know. And I think they'd be quite happy with that.
Matt, how about you? Where do you stand on this, hot
I'm
topic?
with Annette on this one. I'm in the not to reward, or not to reward is probably the wrong way to put it, just given what Annette said, because I do think the reward is we heard you and we're acting on your feedback and thank you for it, and we're going to try to get better. That's the reward. That's why the customer is filling it out, unless you replace it with something else, which is they're not really filling it out to give you feedback so you can get better. They're filling it out for a chance to win a $500 Amex gift card, which, by the way, it sounds pretty good. So if you're not going to fill it out, Stephanie, forward it to me and I'll fill it out.
Right?
And how about you?
But what I would say is, you know, I think, you know, generally speaking, and I will, in this one, I'll say, you know, defer to Howard. I want to hear your point of view on this one because you guys are subject matter experts around surveys and using that as a mechanism for VOC data collection. But, you know, at least from, you know, we all know there are well-known biases around survey data collection. There's recall bias. There's extreme response bias. You know, we hear this a lot from companies that, hey, the only people who fill out our surveys are the ones who had awesome experiences or the ones who had terrible experiences. And we kind of miss the mighty middle of the people who had sort of meh experiences. But there's a lot to learn there as well. And those people don't take out the time to fill it out. And then when you introduce something new, which is a monetary incentive, does it actually exacerbate what is already, you know, in some respects can be a biased collection exercise? Or does it make it better? I don't know the technical answer to that. So Howard, I'll defer to you, but I'm kind of from the, you know, if you will, theoretical or moral standpoint, if you will, I'm with Annette 100% that this is, you know, the reward is that you asked, you heard me, and you took the time to reply or in ideally to do something with the feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with all of that. The one point where I differ is if you are specifically inviting people to give you feedback and you aren't sort of saying you might win, but you are going to win. In other words, I'm paying you $10 for your opinion, or I'm paying you $5 for your opinion. You're going to get a gift card. You're going to get that reward. So it's not something where you're filling out surveys for random things about products that you don't know. As a company, you're specifically inviting people to give you that feedback and saying, I need 10 minutes. I'm willing to give you $10. Let's go for it. That does kind of get you to that quiet middle, because your extreme people on both sides are going to tell you what they think. That quiet middle is hard to get to, and sometimes you do need a little incentive for it. That said, if it's wide open and anybody can take that feedback, I don't want to give them a dime. I don't think you're going to get anything useful out of it. But I can think of a case where we're trying to get specific feedback on a product, and sometimes to cut through, you have to say, look, this product feedback is very valuable to us. We do want your opinion. It doesn't change. You don't have to buy anything, but we'd like to get some time from you. So as long as it's that nice, even exchange, then great. But I'm not going to give an Apple Watch away for someone taking 10 minutes to fill out feedback. I want it to be a sort of a, I don't want to call it a quid pro quo, that good sort of thing, but it should be an even exchange.
Yeah, so we'll do a little shameless plugging. Thank you for that. And so it sounds like we're doing a little, perhaps, maybe, but it depends on the situation, on rewarding. So just shameless plug here, our product, Simple Survey, it helps you actually leverage feedback in one click. And we talked about feedback being a well-rounded approach to the customer experience. And this product gives you an opportunity to do just that and get your foot in the door. The product, it's 100% native to Salesforce, so you can get up and running really quick, really fast, one-click surveys, so that are delivered right within that email text that people can take with a click of a button. And we have updated all of our Simple Survey app, so it is so much more mobile response, mobile first in mind, because we know that everyone's checking their emails on their phones, so that's super important. And one of my favorite features, I think, about Simple Survey is this idea of capturing partial response. I can't tell you how many times I've almost finished a survey that took me 15 minutes to do, and then I abandoned it because I got a phone call or I got a text message or an Instagram notification came through, whatever reason. I know I'm not alone in this. And the great thing about Simple Survey is that if your customer starts to fill out that survey, they get to a couple additional questions that you have that are important, but they end up not finishing the survey, you still capture all of that, that feedback, all that response in Salesforce, and you can follow up with them and say, hey, I noticed, you started to fill out the survey, but you didn't finish it. How can we help? And I think that that's a really great thing. So we want to give you an opportunity to test it out for yourself, and whoever, if you test it out, you are, I know we're talking about rewards, not reward. It's Halloween. I got to offer out some treats here. So go to ic.force.com/simple, test out Simple Survey for yourself, and you will be entered to win a VIP swag bag. I know this is against Annette's rules, but it's Halloween. I want to offer some treats to our attendees who stuck with us all the way to the end. And really quickly, I know we're kind of basically out of time, but if you'll hang with us for just a minute, I want to talk about the future of feedback. Matt, I'll start with you here about what Tethr's doing with AI and kind of rounding out this whole idea of the future of feedback.
Yeah, sure. No, happy to do it. And I think as I shared with the Internet Creations team previously, I think this is a two-pronged battle for all of us in the customer experience space. One is we've got to stop the bleeding on our surveys, right? So whether that's using a platform like Internet Creations, whether it's using some of those best practices we talked about today, closed loop feedback management, not chasing the number, all those kinds of things, listen to your employees and your customers, all that stuff is critical to that piece of stopping the bleeding on survey response rates. But then there's this other question. I think we've kind of entered this new era of customer listening, which is leveraging unstructured data to understand the customer experience and ideally complement the survey data we're already collecting from our customers. So here we're talking about things like our recorded phone conversations, our chat interactions. Maybe you use Service Cloud or Zendesk or something to collect case management data if you're in a business-to-business environment. But these are like gold mines of customer feedback waiting to be mined. And the exciting thing and what we're doing at Tethr is helping companies understand the experience without having to deploy surveys that then tells them where to deploy their surveys and how to contextualize those. So here's a quick example. One of the things we're really excited about, we just launched, was a predictive effort score. So off an algorithm that we built, it's 200 plus variables. We can actually score the effort level of a customer interaction. And then that tells a company immediately after the phone interaction or the chat interaction, what were the good calls that I can learn from and the bad calls that I can do something about. And it gives you immediately actionable feedback, 100% response rate, no bias, lots of rich verbatim. But the cool thing is it then allows you to really target those surveys. So if I know who those high effort, who those customers are who had really bad experiences, now I can actually deploy a more targeted and personalized survey to understand what went wrong and what can we do better. That really makes earns that time, as Howard was saying before, and it gets the customer into that survey to give us that more targeted feedback and let us get it, help them get it off their shoulders and give us a piece of their mind about how we can improve as a business. So anybody's interested in learning more about that, I'd be happy to share it. We're at tethr.com, but shoot me a note on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share with you some more research and details around that.
Thank you so much for that. Annette, do you have anything to add here about the future of feedback?
No, here's one thing that I will add, and this is just experience from conversations with clients and just conversations that I've had, is that I just keep hearing, customers are sick of surveys, no more surveys, too many surveys, surveys. And I don't think surveys are going away. I think surveys will be with us forever. And I think that's not a bad thing. But I think there are other ways to listen to customers, rather than asking, we've got to listen. I've got, clients setting up customer advisory boards. They're using social media. They're chasing down the online reviews and trying to stay on top of that. So I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that the future of feedback is really all about where our customers, and I don't think this is much different from, what we've been talking about, say, for the last 5 years, is that it's going to be wherever our customers want to give us feedback. And then if you've got tools like Tethr and others where, you can mine that data and get the insights out of it, where you can, text analytics, other types of analytics that help you to predict and prescribe and those kinds of things. I think that's going to be really powerful going forward. But I think it's going to be, feedback is going to obviously go well beyond surveys.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And, just for a couple quick, 4 key takeaways here, remember, it's not about the score. It's so much more than that. It's about that two-way street, focusing on the experience, creating that customer-centric culture that, you're not, have a little bit more self-awareness in your processes to not when that there's a bad Wi-Fi on the plane, not hit Matt up for how was the Wi-Fi experience, because Matt's going to tell you it was not great at all.
Unfortunately, I'll buy it again because I can't do my job without it. So.
Yeah, that's the thing. Fix it, make it better. Make the effort, and not just surveys, but make the effort that you're putting your customers through. Make it simple. Make the entire journey simple. And then finally, don't game the system. We still do want you to go to ic.force.com/simple to get a treat from us. But overall, don't game the system. The reward here is about taking action and doing something with that feedback to elicit more feedback. And again, this is part of what we are, we've done here at Internet Creation, a 4-pronged approach to a better service experience, from responsiveness, utilization, personalizing experiences, and feedback. It only really just makes up this entire puzzle. You can't have one without the other. And, if you've joined us before throughout the last few months, you've seen this before. We'd love to talk to you about it more. If you want, you can reach out to us, info@internetcreations.com. And I do want to give a very, very huge thank you to our guests today, Matt Dixon and Annette Franz. Thank you so much. Applause, applause, applause. Where can people go if they want to? Thank you. Where can people go if they want to learn more from you?
I'll go ahead and jump in. You can either follow me on Twitter at Annette Franz, or you can check out my website, www.cx-journey.com.
Yeah, and I always I love connecting with folks after events like these. So also on Twitter, Matthew X Dixon, and send me a LinkedIn invitation if you'd like to connect that way and keep the dialogue going. And then, as I mentioned before, My company, our AI venture, is at tethr.com. That's Tethr. We dropped the E between the H and the R because we're a startup. So, and that's what you do. So you don't
That's what we do.
by vowel. So it's tethr.com, but lots of cool content about this idea of predictive scoring and leveraging unstructured data to surface CX insights.
Well, thank you so much again. I really appreciate it. Myself and Howard will hang out for a little bit if there's any questions that come in. Otherwise, we will see you on the trail. Hope to see you at Dreamforce at the CX Suite. You can go check us out, and a copy of this recording will be made available to you all tomorrow. If you signed up, you'll get, if you attended today's webinar, you'll get a copy of that in your inbox. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a beautiful day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.